In the AP issue family, let me show you another case which is pretty common as well. So I'm back on my controller and my time is right this time, more or less. I didn't change the time, so I'm back somewhere in 2015. And I want to get this AP here on the controller, but my AP is not joining. One very common cause of that is the configuration of the country on the controller, because you can change the country on the controller. And on the access points, as you know, you have two types of access points. Those that have a country that is already set into the AP, and those that are set to universal, where you can configure the country based on an app on your phone, based on where you are in the world, where you join this access point to a controller. So in both cases, what is key is that the controller has to support the country code that is implemented into your access point. So if you have, like I have here, a controller which is set to DE, which is Germany, and your access point is not set to DE, it is not the German access point, that AP is going to discover the controller maybe, is going to send a join request to the controller, but as soon as it does that, it's going to get the information from the controller that the country for which the controller is set is DE. And the access point is going to look at its own configuration and say, I am not set for DE, so I cannot get my parameters from you because you don't have my country values, you don't have my country settings. You have one specific country which is not mine. So in that case, the access point is going to refuse to join. It's going to reboot and try to find another controller instead. And maybe it's going to rediscover this one again, and it will try again and fail again. So on the controller, you can define more than one country if you want to. If you have access points in different countries, you can support more than one. But you have at least to support the country of your access point. So if you go to SNMP trap logs, in that case, you will see something saying that the access point is deassociated, and it's not going to tell you much about why the AP is not coming back. Of course, in my case, if you look down the screen, you can see a log number 6, country of operation changed to DE, because that's my lab. But if I clear that log, or if that operation changed more than 256 lines ago, you will not see anything in the trap log telling you why the access point is not joining. But if you go to logs and message logs, and you look here, you will see that the access point also doesn't seem to tell you much about what the problem is. So how do you troubleshoot that? Yeah, you see some messages, but here suddenly it says, the system detects an invalid regulatory domain. And this is a bit confusing because if you don't think about the access points, you'll think, what do you mean invalid regulatory domain? My controller is set for the right domain. Because in fact, the problem is the AP having a different domain, not the controller having a wrong domain. So it can be also interesting when you have this kind of issue where the AP doesn't join to go here, go to the country and check if the country you have on the controller or the countries you have on your controller are matching the country of all your access points. And if you see one AP that has a country that is not on your controller, add that country like I did here, the US. And of course, if your domain is wrong in the sense that you are using DE and you're not in Germany, you can also remove that domain that you're not using. And once you do that, of course, the access point is going to join. So AP issues commonly come down to these two, but time issue also includes some other items. Keep in mind that it's not only about access points joining controllers, it's about anything that generates certificates. So if you have a client laptop that joins an SSID and that SSID is using TLS, you're going to send certificates. If that SSID is using PEEP, you're going to receive certificates. So often you need to make sure that all your systems are pretty much in the same time window. Again, it doesn't need to be very close in terms of microseconds, although it's always good to have an NTP configuration everywhere. But the configuration must be actually accurate enough that the certificate that you receive can have a validity that makes sense. So if you have a client that joins an SSID and fails to do so, and some other clients do join that SSID, one thing you may want to verify is if that SSID uses a TLS-based authentication, TLS or PEEP, what the time is everywhere. On the controller, of course, like we just did, on the authentication server, and of course also on the client. And you see that here, I have some time on my client, and it's going to impact the validity of the certificates on my client. If you work with certificates and you create those certificates from the authentication server or from anywhere, and you push them to the client, also make sure that those certificates were created at a time that makes sense from that client standpoint. There's something you can check here. I'm on Explorer. If you go to the options and Internet options, there is this content tab where you can check the certificates. And when you check the certificates, you can point to a certificate that was downloaded to that client, pick whatever certificates you want to check, and if you view it, it's going to tell you what the validity is for that certificate. And it happens very often if you work in a lab or if you deploy in a network that you may have a source of certificate, certification authority, which time is only 1 hour ahead of your laptop, generates a certificate that you push down to your laptop, and the laptop of course says that the certificate is not valid yet. And you would see this, valid from, and you would say certificate not valid. So always verify when there is a certificate involved somewhere, what the validity is for that certificate and what the time window is for the certificate validity, and check the time everywhere at every step of the way: client, controller, and authentication server, and of course certification authority.